So here we are finally at the last chapter that we're going to talk about. So you'll probably notice that chapter 13, the first part of it is all dedicated to the muscles of mastication or chewing, and we're not going to talk about that at all. So really mostly what we're going to be talking about is just a few pages about ventilation or breathing. So ventilation is the mechanical process by which air is inhaled and exhaled through the lungs. Very important. Our muscles don't work without oxygen. Our cellular metabolism doesn't work without oxygen, for very long anyhow. Another name for ventilation is respiration. Our respiration rate is about 12 to 20 times per minute at rest. So it's one of the vital signs to count people's respiratory rate. The mechanics of ventilation are based on an interaction between muscles and the joints of the axial skeleton, and then also some good passive pressure things. So I think breathing is a really important, obviously, and a really interesting area. It's one of the few vital functions that we can just voluntarily take control of, change, but we don't have to think about it all the time. Most of the time we're not thinking about it at all. Our body's just doing it automatically for us. So here we have this automatic vital function in our body that we can take control of and change if we want to. So that's pretty neat, I think. It's really our only vital function that we can do that. So I kind of like this picture. This one's not from the book. With inspiration or breathing in, the chest expands, the ribs lift, the diaphragm gets drawn down as it contracts, and the chest cavity expands. When you breathe out, the diaphragm relaxes, the chest cavity decreases, the ribs descend. There's some elastic recoil in the lungs, and the chest contracts, and the air goes out. So there is some active portion to it and some passive portion. So we basically classify ventilation in two types. One of them is quiet ventilation. So it occurs during relatively sedentary activities. So this woman here doing yoga in the park, lying in Shavasana, is hopefully doing quiet ventilation. Looks very relaxing, doesn't it? Forced ventilation occurs during activities requiring rapid and large exchanges of air, such as vigorous exercise, or, unfortunately, as a result of respiratory diseases. So the woman over here doing CrossFit or something, she's doing her renegade rows. She's really having to rapidly exchange large amounts of air so she can fuel her muscles with oxygen. So I'm sure that you learned this in anatomy and physiology, and we will review it briefly here. And then we will review it again when we're talking about the respiratory system in pathophysiology. So, because we're going to talk about when it doesn't work right. Basically, I'm going to define some terms with lung volumes. So the tidal volume is the volume of air that's moved in and out of the lungs during each ventilation cycle. It is not the total lung capacity. We have some reserve volume. So the inspiratory reserve volume is the amount of air that can be taken into the lungs on a forced inspiration. It's like if somebody says suck in as much air as you possibly can, that is our inspiratory reserve volume. It's what we have available to take in lungs, basically. The expiratory reserve volume is the amount of air that can be pushed out of the lungs on a forced exhalation. So normally we have some amount of air in our lungs that is just kind of waiting there until we force it out. And the tidal volume is going in and out all the time. So when we look at this graph, The tidal volume is the small sort of sine wave going in the middle, and it's less than 1,000 milliliters in and out on a regular basis. When we have that first big peak, that's where we take the big inspiration. We try to suck in as much air as we possibly can into our lungs, and that's our inspiratory reserve volume. Then we go back to the regular tidal volume, and then we try to blow all the air out as much as we can push out. We're using all of our accessory muscles to do it, and that's that big dip on the bottom. So the inspiratory capacity is how much can you inhale on that forced inspiration. The vital capacity is the total volume of air that can be moved in and out of the lungs on a maximal forced inspiration and a maximal forced expiration. So it's basically all the other volumes combined. It's your expiratory reserve volume plus your inspiratory reserve volume plus your tidal volume. And that is our vital capacity. It's our total lung capacity. We also have a functional residual capacity, and that has to do with the elasticity of our lungs. So during inspiration, we draw air into the lungs, and expiration pushes air out of the lungs. Most of the physics behind inspiration and expiration are based on Boyle's law, which you may remember from chemistry, or you may remember it from anatomy and physiology. The volume and pressure exerted by a gas are inversely proportional. So greater volume, less pressure. Less volume, greater pressure. So during quiet inspiration, it's primarily quiet expiration, is primarily a passive process, not dependent on muscular activation. It's driven by the elastic recoil of the lungs and the thorax, and the connective tissues of stretched inspiratory muscles. So it's like when you take a deep inhale and then just relax and let it all go out. Forced expiration involves active contraction of expiratory muscles such as abdominals during actions like sneezing or blowing out candles or coughing. So someone who has reduced abdominal action because of a spinal cord injury or some other injury has trouble with forced expiration, and so sometimes you need to do an assisted expiration with them. One spinal cord injured patient, I think his injury was T7. He was in a motorcycle accident. But he said that he would feel like he was building up to a really big sneeze. You know, you feel that sneeze coming on. And then when it came out, it'd be like, achoo, like a tiny little kitten sneeze. And he said it was always very disappointing. So sometimes people who have compromised abdominal muscles need an assisted expiration. So the diaphragm is the primary muscle of inspiration. All of the other ones we've talked about, the origins and insertions and actions and innervations in previous chapters. The diaphragm is only dedicated to inspiration. It does not do any other action in the body. So its origin is the inner surfaces of the, it has a costal part, and a sternal part, and a lumbar part. So the costal part is the inner surfaces of the costal cartilages and adjacent bony regions of ribs 6 through 12. So it has quite a broad origin around the ribs. And it's basically a dome separating the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. And the line of pull is the line of those arrows. So the sternal part is the posterior side of the xiphoid process. And the lumbar part is the aponeurotic arches covering external surfaces of the quadratus lumborum and the psoas major. And the bodies of L1 through L3 and the left and right crusts, those are part of the tendons of the diaphragm. So interestingly enough, this muscle inserts on itself. It inserts on the central tendon near the dome of the diaphragm. So you can think of the diaphragm as being a big dome with a central tendon coming down from the middle of the dome. So when the muscle contracts, it pulls the dome down, increasing the size of the thoracic cavity. It's innervated by the phrenic nerve, which is C3 to C5, and it's the primary muscle of inspiration. The external intercostals can also help with quiet inspiration. It's pure diaphragm. With forced inspiration, the external intercostals and other assisting muscles can help by elevating the ribs and expanding the thorax. There are 11 intercostals on each side. Each muscle arises from the inferior border of the rib and inserts on the upper border of the rib below. So when the insertion moves towards the origin, it lifts the ribs. So, and it's innervated by intercostal nerves in its neighborhood. So the idea of lifting the ribs to increase the thorax, that's what the external intercostals do. So the internal intercostals, they have the opposite fiber direction from the external intercostals. There are 11 per side, and each muscle rises from the upper border of a rib and inserts on the lower border of the rib. So it assists with forced expiration by depressing the ribs, so it pulls in the opposite direction from the external intercostals. It pulls the ribs down. The external intercostals pull the ribs up. The scalenes, because they attach to the ribs, the anterior, middle, and posterior scalenes, can assist with inspiration by elevating the upper ribs and the attached sternum. In people who have chronic respiratory disorders, you can see excessive hypertrophy of the scalenes and sometimes the sternocleidomastoid. So during forced expiration, active muscle contraction is required to rapidly reduce intrathoracic volume and force the air out. So the muscles of forced expiration include the 4 abdominal muscles and the internal intercostals. So all 4 layers of abdominal muscles compress the abdomen, and the internal intercostals pull the ribs down. Forced expiration is driven primarily by the abdominal muscles, and adequate control over the abdominal muscles is important for coughing and responding to a gag reflex. Coughing removes secretion from the bronchial tree and reduces the likelihood of lung infection. So coughing is an important thing to be able to do. So people that, like I was talking about before, people with spinal cord injuries who do not have control over their abdominal muscles, they have difficulty clearing secretions from their lungs, and so they're more prone to getting pneumonia and lung infections. So a strong contraction of the abdominals is also used to dislodge objects lodged in the trachea, like choking on a piece of food. That's why with the Heimlich maneuver, we assist that abdominal contraction by physically pushing on their abdomen. So people with weakened or paralyzed abdominal muscles have to learn alternative methods of coughing or have someone do an assisted cough. So in this picture, the person who's got their hands on the other person's ribs is assisting that person with coughing and forced expiration. So a lot of the muscles and joints interact during ventilation. The actions of the different muscles produce similar effects on intrathoracic volume, allowing for inspiration and expiration. So there's a lot of redundancy in the system, so it can be adaptable and responsive. So in the lab, we're going to do some exercises with relaxed inspiration and forced inspiration, and relaxed expiration and forced expiration. And you're going to see what part of the ribs and abdominals are involved in those different types of inspiration and expiration. So it's pretty interesting and vital to our function. I'm always telling people to not hold their breath during exercises. And so I joke around with them and I say, oh yeah, I recommend that you breathe in and out throughout the day. And the night, ideally. So by making a joke of it, it reminds people like, oh right, I have to breathe, I can't hold my breath.